All right. Hello, everyone. It has been a minute. Uh, Welcome to Of Skin and Spokes. Hey, I'm getting the name right more often now. We're doing great. That's exciting. Um, as I continue, I don't know. My brain's in a bunch of places, but I'm excited to be here today. It has been a really long time. I was looking at Twitch the other day and it was like last stream 20 days ago. And I was like, wow, I don't know where the last 3 weeks went. What happened there? So I'm really excited to be back. I'm really happy. I missed doing this with all of you. Yeah, I'm really excited about today's episode. We're going to be actually talking about the basically like the thing that I was doing that was taking me away from the stream in the first place, and then that I then crashed after, during and after, you know, as disabled people do. Uh, but I'm really excited to be talking with all of you about that today. I will start off with doing a visual description. Hi, I'm Shay. I am a white, non binary, trans mask ish, sometimes who knows what is gender person in their mid 30s. I have short brown hair. It's curly and long on the top and shorter on the sides. Have a bunch of facial piercings. Today I am wearing an aqua tank top, and I have blue compression sleeves on my arms that are more of a like robin's egg blue with black patterns on them, because I am having one of those squish yourself into as much compression as possible days to be upright. It's good times. Good times. Um, that's the description. Cool. How are people doing this week? I don't know if we've actually like had anybody log in. We'll see. So far, the dashboard tells me that nobody's watching, but it doesn't always update well, especially when my computer's having a hard time keeping the stream running. So say hi in the chat if you're here, because it's the only way that I know. Uh, let's see, what are some other things that I can talk to people about while I'm waiting for people to get here? Oh, we had the Pushmakers town hall on Friday. Oh, I'm so happy with how it went. It was so good. If you were there and you're watching this, thank you for being there. It was fantastic. If you weren't there, you missed out on like a really truly lovely event. Um, Hopefully the first of like many conversations about this project. This project is really just getting off the ground, and so this was really its kind of launch into the world of what is this thing that we've been working on and mapping and thinking and dreaming really deeply about for the last 8 months. The we being Christina at Dance Makers as the interim artistic producer, and the whole Dance Makers team. Really, like the whole team that we put together at Pushmakers is just fantastic. I cannot say enough good things about working with these humans. Um, there's a video that is part of the launch that we launched on Friday. Uh, Danielle and Simeon from Cinematoscape, my favorite film humans, some of my favorite film humans, put together an absolutely stunning, gorgeous video about what we're doing. Uh, it should go up publicly like next week in its current form. It's going to continue to evolve. I'm very excited about how I love film. I love film so much. I love everything to do with film. And yeah, like this is going places. Seeing this is we're building out this story, and we're taking note of what we're doing as we're doing it, which is so fucking important as disabled people breaking new ground, and also just so much fun as someone who like just I love film. I love it. It's really hard sometimes to make it, but I'm getting better at it, and it's going to keep getting better. And I love that. It makes me really happy. Um, But yeah, when that goes live on the Dance Makers website, yes, it should, when that happens, like in next week's episodes, I'll make sure that the links go into the chat and into the YouTube liner notes and all of those things so that people can see it when it's actually publicly available. I tested the video description in the town hall, got some great feedback, working on draft 2.0, and then tossing that back to my friend. And then once I get sign off on that, then we'll even have an image described version. There we go. That's the right word. I'm very excited. This is the first like active, like intense audio description that I've written by myself. So I'm very pleased. I'm very pleased at how I've put that one together. It's not to say that it's like the professional standard or anything like that, but it's there and it's done, and that makes me really happy. What else? Oh, hey, look, the screen has updated to tell me that there is someone watching. That's exciting. Hooray, hello. I'm in a really weird mood today. I'm in a lot of pain, so you're getting like much less filtering. The upright thing is challenging today, but I'm pushing through because I want to talk to people. Oh, I wanted to like actually like specifically say hi to the folks who are finding us on YouTube. Some of these videos are getting quite a lot of engagement. So like if you're finding us there, hi, welcome. I'm really happy that you're here and having these conversations with us and finding my musings on the stuff that I'm doing interesting, valuable, worthwhile to spend your time with. So thanks for being here. Wheelam has to take me down a peg in the chat and writes, "It's me. I'm the one person." Thanks. I mean, I assumed it was you, but, you know, let me have my moment. Let me have my thing. Or at least say hi so that then I don't, you know? um, what else? Oh, video game things. This week I started playing Alba, a wildlife adventure. I'm almost done. It's this really like it's this really fun game. I'm having a really good time playing it. It's designed for like younger kids. Like I'd say that like it was designed with kids in the like 10 to 13-ish age range. I mean, it plays a little bit young for 13, but depending on the kid, like and depending on what they're into. Yeah. Um, it's like this idea of like it's a fictional Mediterranean kind of Spanish inspired island that has this nature preserve that's being threatened by a uh, luxury hotel development, and you play as two kids. The main character is Alba. She's there visiting her grandparents and staying with them for the big annual like summer festival that they have at the end of the week. And her friend that lives on the island, Inez, and they form a wildlife association, and they go all around the island fixing it up and documenting the wildlife to like prove why it should be our like respected habitat. And you get to go and be a part of like habitat conservation stuff. And for me, like, I don't know. I was a part of Girl Guides, like, back in the day, like, as a young person. And, like, this is the things that I did with my spare time when I was a young person of that age. And so it pulls on the, like, heartstrings of my childhood activism. And I'm having such a good time. I am almost done, and I cannot wait to get to the end. It's fantastic. Otherwise, I don't know. Work is just work at the moment. Writing a lot of proposals. And, like, when you're in the proposal stage of things, it's a lot of paperwork and hope, but you don't know where things are going to go. So I'm in a season of planting a lot of seeds and knowing that they won't all come through, but it'll be exciting to see what does. It's like this huge palette of projects that I'm so excited about that like have been quietly developing over the last 2 years, and things are finally moving into stages where they can move forward. And it's so exciting. So exciting. All right. I mean, that was my whole like, hey, I'll talk at people until we can have a conversation stuff. How is everybody else doing? I'm gonna move over. I'm not like properly framed, and it's annoying. Whelan says they're exhausted. It's not a surprise. We're both exhausted. Move the mic close, but not all that visible. There we go. All right. Cool. Well, today we're talking about walking holding. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I guess like you all have heard like a little bit about me talking about like the public art piece that I was working on, but didn't want to talk about what it was until it happened. And so, surprise, it was walking holding. What is walking holding? Walking holding is like it's an experimental public performance piece. It was created by Rosanna Cade, who is a queer Scottish artist, and the whole work is inspired from having like a personal fascination with the act of holding hands in public space and like the meanings that we project onto either the experience of holding hands with someone else or observing other people holding hands in public spaces, and like coming at it particularly like from a queer perspective of having varying degrees of comfort and safety and awareness of like that act of reaching out for a significant other's hand in public. How the project unfolds and like what it actually like looks like is there's a series of I don't know, I guess we'll talk. So the way that you experience, I'll talk about it from the person experiencing its perspective as opposed to the production perspective of how you explain it. So from the person experiencing it, you are led around a route as a guided walk. And every so often along your walk, you're met with a new person that you encounter. And as you come into the space, you might not know where that person is going to come from. Some of the spaces, it might be obvious that they're there, but it might be an unexpected way of encountering them or an unexpected place to encounter someone else. In a lot of the places, the encounters are in busier spaces in public because you're traveling city streets and like public art activated areas of cities, so more populated parts of cities. And so you don't know as you come into an area who is the person there, who is the next guide. And that's a really like key component of the work, is challenging sort of your expectation of who you encounter in a city. And so you basically get this like relay walking tour of an area of a city where you encounter several different people who are part of the performance. In terms of like who the performers are, like they're not performing anything. They're just there to be human. And so like there's no real there is dramaturgy to it. I don't want to be like there's no dramaturgy to it. It's not that. Like but there's no, you're there to be authentic and be present in the moment. And there is elements of that you are mindful of, like space and relationship and your perspective on the space that you're walking in. So it's a performance in that sense, in that it is facilitated and in that it is guided, but nobody is coming up with lines. And every time the experience that you're having is that experience of being like in the moment with the other person and experiencing the same thing together. And just like getting to know people and how they move through a space, what they notice as they move through a space. What are the things, who do you talk about what with, and why do you feel comfortable to have that conversation? And all of those are like key components and key parts of this work. all of those themes just fascinate me so much from so many different perspectives. I think that there's so many cool things that I could say about how this work is put together. Um, we could like really dive deeply into taking it apart, and like it's just really cool. It just takes into account so much of like what it means to make space for humans in how it comes together and in how it is experienced by the people who go through it. And so in this particular, it's been produced like all around the world. In this particular production of it, it was produced by the Bentway, which is a public art activation area in Toronto, that exists like under overpass highway. Like there's a highway overhead of it, and then the area that's activated is underneath the highway. And it's in a part of Toronto that was historically quite industrial, but it's been recently, like over the last 10 years, dramatically redeveloped. Um, and yeah, so like now it's much more commercial residential, whereas before it was industrial. It's still like a part of Toronto that like the central rail corridor runs through into the downtown area. So there's still like an industrial feel to it because you're over train tracks, and there's, bridges to get back up and down. It's a really like, particularly from a mobility device user perspective, that area of Toronto is really interesting. Um, yeah, we'll get into that as we talk more about how it unfolds, because that's not unrelated to how this project came together, which is really what we're talking about today. Um, in the production, just to like make sure that everybody gets recognized for what they do, it was produced by Alex Rand, and Ari Evans was the lead artist. There's also photographers involved. There's also like a whole bunch of other folks involved. This is not an exhaustive list, but just like in terms of the folks who were really in charge of like these parts and these decisions that I'm talking about, this was much of the work of Aria and Alex. Um, and yeah, because like I've wanted to talk about this for such a long time because it was such interesting themes that were coming together in the work, but because like so much of the genuineness of what would transpire would be in that moment of not knowing that there were wheelchair users involved in the production. So it was hard to like have a way to really be able to talk about it that didn't undermine uh, like the experiential encounter. Fuel injection is here. Hi. They said hi. Sorry I'm late. It's okay. I'm excited that you're here. Welcome. Do. Okay, I think that was all of my notes. Um, yeah. So basically, I wanted to kind of talk about how all of this came together and talk about like how we went through this process, and also like from the beginning, like this was awesome. It was great. Um, it really like it was a really profound experience to take part in it in so many ways. And like all of that was because of all of these moments of being able to move thoughtfully and with intention. And I think that like one of the biggest lessons, not like lessons is silly, but like when I talk about stuff, I talk about it because I think that there's things worth hearing about why we did it. And I think that for me, what I would want other people who organize like public art work that looks like this, that takes this shape, that plays with these kinds of themes, that's meant to be representative of a particular community's experience. I think that I want to highlight like how little extra attention it takes in an already intentional and thoughtful process to actually make disabled people feel like they really belong in processes like these. And so I wanted to talk about like what went on in the process of making this work that actually made it such a like good positive experience for everyone. Um, and so like I'll start like with how like even we got involved with the project. Wheelam was also involved in the project, so I'm probably gonna say we a whole lot this episode. Whenever I do that and don't clarify who the we is, people get confused. So the we is Wheelam and I most of the time. How did we get involved in the project? So Aria reached out to me with Alex involved, just being like, "Hey, we're doing this show. We really want to make sure that there is, a wheelchair user in the show. Uh, can you help us like find the right kind of person?" The people that, because of the nature of it, they weren't looking for folks who were performers per se, but they were looking for folks who had either like experience with like this kind of public art type stuff before, or were performance adjacent. So like we're very used, like it was coming together as a very quick process, so people had to kind of know the ropes of getting a show up and on its feet quickly, or like not everybody had to know that, but like enough people had to be comfortable with a process that moved that fast. So yeah, people weren't like professional. Yeah, like I don't. I keep. They were people in Toronto's arts community, and it was great. And so they were looking for like wheelchair or other mobility device users who um, were arts adjacent, who would be good for public performance stuff, but not performers. And one of the first like conversations that Alex and Ardia and I had to have was like that, hey, like when you're bringing disability into public performance art, especially when people aren't expecting to encounter a wheelchair user in public, we need to be really mindful about how we do that. You can go back to listening to Wheelam and I kind of talk about a trip that we had to Niagara Falls in the episode about disability in public, if you want more context for some of the pieces of disability in public that can get really super out of hand as a disabled person quickly. And actually, I think too that that was the episode that got crashed by a whole bunch of other folks too. So that episode in particular is a stunning example of living it in real time, what being disabled in public can be about, and how quickly it can escalate to being out of hand. Which was like entirely like exactly the point. Like being disabled in public can escalate quickly and it can get out of hand, and there needs to be thoughtfulness in terms of how we make sure that there's care support for someone if that does happen, that there's pre-planning to make sure that that doesn't happen, that we're mindful of the process of putting it together itself to make sure that that's accessible at all points, recognizing that accessibility is often more than just like, yes, the bathroom is wheelchair accessible. It's usually a lot more complex. Fool Injection says, oh yeah, I remember that escalated so quickly. Yeah. And like that's a normal fast escalation of like when things go violent in disability space. Like that's what it looks like. They don't get a little bit wonky. I have a lot of skill to navigate the it gets a little bit wonky and dicey for a minute there. uh it descends into like chaos immediately. It's absurd. It's wild. uh you go from 0 to 100 based off of somebody like reaching out and thinking that they should touch you, and you're like, no, I did not ask to be assaulted from behind, thank you. Wheelam says, also, let's be real, the accessible washroom isn't always accessible, especially as a power chair user or a mobility device, or like a mobility scooter with a 60-inch turning radius. Whew. Good luck getting that into an accessible stall. um, I did it. It's not fun. Well, like, I didn't. I understand that it can't be done because I did use one. That's what I mean. Okay, let's get back on track. Let's get back on track here. Yeah. So we had a conversation about like how much like how much and how significant the access planning was, and also what it was asking of a disabled person to agree to participate in the performance, and to recognize that like the risk that it was putting themselves at was different than the risk that other disabled that other participants were taking. And it's not necessarily to say that like one person has more of a risk or one person has less of a risk, but it's also just to say that like whenever we're planning public work, there are certain risks that we are mindful of that we know are amplified by different factors of the performance and the performers. And that disability was an aspect of the performance that required just as much care and just as much space to be like one of those parallel thought channels in the process. And so it was actually like, when I think about how much you had to account for, like, it was so much stuff and so many things that were so unexpected unfolded during this process. Um, During the process itself, uh, yeah, like, so we kind of came to an agreement that my role in the process was that I would be the person who helped do all of that thinking through for the process. Um, yeah, that's what I'm really good at. That's what I really like to do. And that I would support another performer coming in, because recognizing that holding both of those roles can be too much on people at once. And so making sure that the performer didn't have to do any of that. Out of convenience, and because having that conversation took time, Wheelum was the performer. Uh, but also because also because they were prepared and we were having conversations, and I was confident that I could, that like together, because also like I have access needs and care needs going into these spaces too. And so to some degree it's just easier because then we have the buddy system, we do the thing together, and we know each other's needs really super well, and we can navigate that because we have years of experience of navigating that together. Which is something that like care relationships take knowledge, right? And so when you're convening a care team around a production, and like there was a care person attached to this team. I'm now regretting that I thinged Victoria Mata, that's her name. I was like, I remembered someone's name without writing it down. Look at me go. I'm doing so well today. Um, no filter. No filter. Let's take some tea and try and regain my filter and focus a little bit. But yeah, so like there was a care person attached to this process. But when you're not disabled and you're not looking for all of the things that can go wrong, it can sometimes seem as a shock that the typical and expected things go wrong. And sometimes, like, someone with genuinely all of the best intentions in the world can, can also be a source of escalation of a situation, because a lot of the things, like, nothing that happened during this production, and like there was a lot of stuff that happened through like nobody's fault, like whoa, like I want to make that clear, like just because being disabled is unpredictable and working with the public is unpredictable, so many of the things that happened were not things that anyone could have like ever accounted for in any kind of way. And that's why you need someone who understands that, who can like be the resource and support person for everyone when that stuff goes down. Because if it's it's not a surprise to a disabled person that these things happen. Okay. Let's catch up on the chat before it gets too far ahead. Fool Injection says tea is good. My partner made some Earl Grey earlier, much needed. Absolutely. I drink jasmine green tea day in and day out, but Earl Grey is my I am feeling sad or sick tea, and it is great. And yeah. Um, Wheelam says wheelchair van ramp pry bar experience. Yes, we're getting to that. We're building to this. Then Wheelam says nope. I don't remember what that's. It. Oh, that it's not a surprise to us. Yes, nope, it is not a surprise to us. And then Fool Injection says working with the public is the worst. Okay, yes, and Fool Injection. What I kind of want to say back to that is, and also, when you are disabled, there is no separating being in public from working with the public. And I think that that's like the really critical thing for non-disabled people to understand about disabled people's experiences in public is that to one degree or another, every interaction that we have with strangers in public spaces requires like customer service face and customer service mask or educator mask. That's like actually like the critical piece of this whole thing. Wheelam says, oof, yes, it really does. Like that's like if I had to explain the mental toll, like somewhere I was one of the I had a poll up on Instagram of what should we talk about today, and it was talking about various themes that came out of this experience of working with the public, because one of them is like talking about the invisible mental loads that disabled people carry with them all the time, and part of that is the like customer service face anytime you're in public. As part of this process, because we were mapping out spaces and a walking route in a downtown Toronto neighborhood, a whole bunch of rehearsal days that we had, like every rehearsal day that we had, was walking around the neighborhood together. And there was like one day where Wheelam and I were like doing a section of the route that didn't ultimately get included, the route at the time that we were working with. And we like go by, and I'm holding on to like so to explain this area geographically a little bit, it's an area that is very close to the waterfront, and it has like a very steep uphill that then levels out, and then there's a bridge, so you've got to go uphill to the bridge, and then like so there's a number of like very steep and it's an overpass bridge, so like it's a huge uphill ramp to get up it. I'm in a manual wheelchair, and Wheelam was using their power chair, and I am not in shape right now to do those hills the number of times that we were doing them. And so for a big portion of the rehearsal days, I was holding onto the back of Wheelam's power chair behind them to go uphill to save my energy. To put some context to like what people were actually seeing as we traversed public space together was a manual wheelchair user holding on to the back bars of a power chair user. Wheelam, no, hold on. Fool Injection says nods, I could get that. The customer service face thing. Wheelam says, to be fair, they were definitely not 1 to 12 grade. Well, they're hills. They're not required to follow the rise. I mean, the ramp itself, I don't know what it was. It might have been to code. Well, it wasn't to code because it didn't have resting. To code ramps, you have 10 feet of ramp and then 10 feet of flat is the current standard for like really long ramps like these to go up like bridges and stuff, or to be like switchbacks with resting zones to like not make people push uphill for forever and ever and ever and ever without a rest, but they don't. And then like the hills themselves were quite steep too. So anyway, like there's a section, the section of the route that we were doing that was purely uphill. So I'm holding onto the back of their power chair nearly the whole way. And it goes through a public park, and there's guys playing, what was it? Was it a tennis court? I can't remember whether it was a tennis court or a basketball court, some kind of sport ball court. And there guys, oh, Willem says soccer. Yeah, see, sport ball court. or football, I guess, for fuel injection. I'll do the uh, regional translation. But yeah, and they make like they what did they say? They were like, "Oh, that's genius," or like something like that. It was absurd. Fuel injection says there are a fair few ramps I can think of, especially at like rail stations here, which are totally not 10 foot and 10 foot rest. Yeah, it's an emerging standard, so it's like what places are being built to now, but a lot of this infrastructure was built with older building codes that didn't require a resting zone. Like everything with um uh brain, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Everything with the built environment is incremental in terms of accessibility, and unfortunately, until we see some pretty significant updates to, in particular, our residential building code in Canada, we're not gonna actually like see a lot of changes to the built environment. Full injection says soccer is apparently short for association football, so shrugs, either or is fine. Sure. I don't understand the difference between association football or other things, but sports ball, yay. Willem says yay. We have our local train station that is just long ass ramps and only flat at the switchbacks. Yup. Yup. Yay, Metrolinx. Um All right, trying to get us back on track here. Willem says because outdoor ramps are great. Yes. I mean, like, some are. There are good ramps in the world. There's ramps that I have a lot of fun with. I think that we need to treat ramps like we treat stairs, like central design features that are central elements of the space that they're a part of, that give thought and intention. Like, so many things would be so different in this world if, like, people actually, like, come on, what's the word? Actually thought through holistically what disabled people experience from endpoint to endpoint. Like, think about how many ramps a disabled person must encounter throughout their whole day. Think about, like, what it's like if you had to climb 6 mountains in your day. And wouldn't it be great if those mountains were actually like, hey, here's a hill, and then we rest for a little while. And hey, here's a hill, and then we rest for a little while. Wouldn't you maybe feel a little bit better when you got to the top of your mountains? Maybe, just a little bit. Like, I don't know. You, like, the rates of shoulder injury in wheelchair users, shoulder, elbow, wrist injury in wheelchair users is absurd because shoulders were not designed to be legs, like physiologically. Like, physiologically, shoulders were not built to withstand the same stress as legs do. People, like, the optimizing the wheelchair only gets you so far. At some point, you actually have to change the environments that wheelchair users encounter. Uh, Full injection says that is the experience you would get at my local station as well. Long ass ramps with flat at the U-turn. Yep. Yep. It's standard. It doesn't make it better that it's everywhere. Full injection says, hand on heart, I did not fully appreciate how hard being a wheelchair user must be until I had a kid and had to push a stroller slash pram with my daughter in it around and couldn't use stairs, etc. Yeah, that's an eye opener. That's the for non-wheelchair users who become parents. Like, that's when they start to get it. It's a really, like, any time that you have to traverse a space with wheels, you become aware just how hostile her environment is to wheeled travel. It's not necessarily a wheelchair user exclusive thing. It's just that usually with strollers, people can pick them up to deal with some of it, you know? And like, you can get strollers that make having to go up and down stairs bearable, or that are tippable to overcome the single step. But you notice it because it takes you out of your routine. And so it starts to become more visible. But yeah, like, these problems aren't unrelated. It's about livable cities, right? Like that's really what so much of this is talking about, is like what makes a livable city for a disabled person. Um, we're getting so off topic today. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. I'm enjoying it. It's a statistic storytelling at its finest. Full Injection says, like, oh, the elevator's broken. How do I get to this place? Or someone has just parked their van, totally blocking the pavements, and I have to bounce down the road and go around this person. And then says, sorry. No, it's fine. Don't feel bad. This is what I want. I wanted it to be a conversation. So, like, don't, like, I'm the one. I'm getting exactly what I asked for. That I'm like, no, I didn't want it like that. Willem says, yes, the fuck what do I do when the pavement is blocked is always fun. Oh, yeah, the like, oh shit, what do I do? That's what I meant. Especially in a power chair. Yeah. Oh, the number of trash cans that I've just outright, like, knocked over and have no guilt about whatsoever. Like, I get it. We live in a city. Sidewalk space is tight. I understand. We're all doing our best, and there is enough space on most of our sidewalks that if we all do our best, there is space. If you are lazy and your trash can gets knocked over because I can't get by and I have no other options, that is a you problem. Whelan says, nope, no guilt about trash cans or rolling onto their grass to avoid it. I mean, again, it's livable cities. Like, as density increases, how wide do sidewalks need to be to actually permit people to move freely throughout their neighborhoods? We were talking about walking holding, now we're just talking about livable cities. I'm into it. Um, Full Injection says, oh, 100% the times I've been tempted to break wing mirrors on vans. Like, I think that there's like 100% times where I've like scratched cars because that was the only way that I could get through. It was like, I, you left it there. What am I supposed to do with it? Wayland says, oh, also about walking and holding on sidewalks, the bloody diagonal cuts between the sidewalk sections near the studio. Yeah, like this was part of what I wanted to actually talk about in the process, was about how much the accessibility of the terrain ended up impacting the route. It was one of the things that I really did want to talk about, because how can I make this make sense? How can I contextualize this for people who that doesn't bring up an image for? So the rehearsals were happening in a building that was alongside a big central park, and it is Full Injection says, be right back, I'm being called away by my kids. No problem, I'm still going to explain this. It's fine, I will catch up. It's fine, it's a Twitch stream. Like, life happens. I get it. We're all like humans with lives. It's good, it's great. Okay, so there's building here. We'll do the ASL marking space thing, describing visuals. I'm just using my hand to mark where the building is. And then there's a big park that the building sits on. And this building holds like a whole lot of things. Like, it's a community center, it's a school, it's the art institution's head office. It's a whole bunch of things. And so this park is huge too. And there's a huge canoe sort of at the top of a huge red canoe at the top of the park. And it's called Canoe Landing, is sort of like this area that we're in. The sidewalk that faces the street that runs through the area is like a stylized sidewalk. It's not a typical city sidewalk where you have straight cuts across the pavement that you hit head on. For whatever aesthetic related reason, they have chosen, the city chose to pave the sidewalk with these diagonal lines cutting across the travel pathway. And so instead, like, my wheelchair is weighted to be a dance wheelchair, and it's not weighted to be an everyday wheelchair, for better or for worse. That was the decision that I made when I ordered this wheelchair. Uh, and therefore, it has a super close together wheelbase, like abnormally compact wheelbase. And that means that I have thrown myself out of my wheelchair facing forward onto the sidewalk over like totally minor concrete imperfections more times than I care to admit to. Usually it's the major ones that trip me up, but like have had like spectacular falls over like a 4 millimeter difference in how the sidewalk lines up. Uh, yeah, there was a couple of years ago I had like a terrible fall in my chair, like banged up the crap out of my elbow, bloodied all over the place, broke my chair, and it was tripping over a crack in the sidewalk. But the difference in height was 4 millimeters, and that was all that it took. And so, what they have done is they've created this like half city block stretch of just absurdly difficult to navigate in a manual wheelchair pathway in like literally the central travel pathway of the community, because this park and the community amenities that are a part of this park space are the central defining feature of the neighborhood. Like, it's the neighborhood anchor, and they made the pathway impassable. Like, really and truly. Like, as a dancer, I can do it, but I have to pay attention to what I'm doing, and I can't walk and hold someone's hand, or I can't walk and have a conversation of any kind of depth with someone at the same time as navigating that kind of an environment, because I have to spend so much of my attention focusing on my wheels and how they're interacting with the concrete in that space to be able to navigate it safely. And of course, it's on a hill. So one way it's uphill and one way it's downhill, and both of which have different challenges with uneven pavement going uphill or downhill. And of course, like, one of the other like common myths about pavement and sidewalks that non-disabled people, and this is something, full injection, that you probably wouldn't get from your kids and like being in the stroller, is that pavement is not flat. Like, when we're walking standing humans, we have this perception that the ground that we walk on is 100% level all of the time. I'm trying to like make my hands be level, but because of the angle of my camera, it just looks like they're going more and more out of plane from each other. Um, so we have this like perception that the ground is level, but it's not. And so it's almost always slanted towards the direction of the road. So if my road is over here, I'm the right, left, I'm so dyslexic. The right, the right of my slanted sidewalk that's trying to slant down towards the road. Um, yeah. So your sidewalk is slanted. So you're always like pushing harder on one side too. So you're dealing. So you have diagonal curve. You're just off balance in every direction over the stretch of pavement. Like, every plane is uneven. And so it's just impassable. Wheelam says level is a lie. Cross slope was a pain when biking, and tenfold in a manual wheelchair. Cool. I'm glad that you remember what that thing is called, because I did not. Cross slope. That's what we're talking about. That all of the sidewalks have cross slope. All of the roads have cross slope. Things that I didn't know until I was a manual wheelchair user. All of our roads actually like have a hump in the middle. They have a hump in the middle. Pudding Butt says, navigating is slightly easier with my power assistant now, but I have to be so much more conscious of any holes and cracks, etc. Otherwise, it just throws me out. Here is Kimber, I believe. Wheelam says, hi, Pudding Butts. Uh, yeah, like, I the only power assist that I could put on this chair would be one that lifted the front wheels off. It would have to be like an e-scooter attachment because I need something to expand my base to move faster. I can't move faster with a base that's this tight together. It's just not safe. So you would need to put a third wheel and use something like the why do I always forget what it's called? What's the Come on, Wheelum, help me out here. You know what I'm talking. Batak. Thank you, Pudding Butts. Batak, Wheelum. Yeah. The freewheel too. Like the freewheel is something that would let, like traveling over more uneven surfaces be more possible. That's the like the freewheel does that part of it, but I don't really think that it would let me go that much faster. It would just make me more stable. But the Batek as a power assist and like the Batek style power assists. Okay. We're so wildly off topic. Where are we going from here? I don't know. We're talking about like livable cities and like the logistics of like wheelchair users and customer service face of navigating with people in public and how like design influences things. Surfaces too, like surfacing is like I'm thinking about like on this route there were some sections that went over like abnormal surfaces and they're really interesting like texturally and artistically, like absolutely. And also like which ones are easy to navigate on that are textured and interesting as a wheelchair user versus the ones that aren't. So some of the things that we were encountering were like corking surface on like that rubberized corking surface that they'll put on a come on, brain playground. That's the word. Willem says the obsession with paving stones really sucks as a mobility device user, regardless of type. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm like, are there any kind of paving stones that are not hard? And like paving in general is like, there's no good, particularly in Canada, like where we have to deal with really harsh winters that degrade like any kind of typical paving surface. Like paving surfaces only really is good for mobility devices if they stay smooth and well maintained, and that's never a municipal priority. Like things are given a particular estimated lifespan and they circle back to it when the lifespan is complete, unless there is substantial enough degradation over time that it needs to be patched or replaced. But like the amount of it being out of spec that impacts mobility device users is so much less than the amount of being out of spec for a city to come in and take action on it. Like the specifications and the level of maintenance that's required just does not exist. Willem says we've had a section of paving block sidewalk left with a trench from removing one row for like a month. Okay. Oh, that like there was a sidewalk there. They took it out. They put down paving stones to try and like cover the hole temporarily, and then it doesn't even fit the hole that they left behind. And then Willem says, and also they just say like that it's AODA compliant. And I think that that's like, I think that people forget that things are compliant within a particular context, right? To give like a really great example of that, like, ooh, oh, I just tweaked my hip. That was not fun. Yay. Um, to give a really good example of that, uh, so we have a wall oven. Our wall oven is installed under our kitchen counter. So it's like mounted onto the uh, it's like it's mounted into the wall, but like it's mounted under the cabinetry and what have you. And because of where they've mounted it, they the first time that they replaced our oven, it broke and it needed to be replaced. And so the first time they brought in an oven to replace our oven, they reinstalled a wall oven, but they installed a wall oven that had a pull out door. And yes, and like the oven was labeled ADA compliant, which is the American standard compliance for accessibility. And so, like, yes, the oven was accessible. And had it been installed at a height that was above my lap, an opening door oven, totally fine as a wheelchair user because you can pull under it and then use the slide in and slide out door, or not door, uh, shelf that it has in it. And you, right, and like it works, and you have what you need to approach your oven accessibly, but not if you install it at a height where you can't actually get under the door, right? So it doesn't matter that it's ADA accessible. We couldn't use it, and we had to get a side door opening oven, and they had to actually replace our oven twice because it was labeled accessible. It was accessible. It wasn't accessible in the context that they used it, which is what makes it so frustrating sometimes when you sit in like consultation meetings and people are like, it'll be accessible, it'll be accessible. And I'm like, how am I supposed to believe that when none of these renderings are accessible, when you haven't addressed accessibility in any other like part of your plan, you've given no details, and then it's like we're gonna design everything and then we'll figure, like, that's actually like the city process of how they do things often, is that they'll design everything and then kind of figure out how to make that design accessible, as opposed to starting from the beginning of saying, if it's worth designing for public space, it's worth designing accessibly from the beginning. And including like the spectrum of disabled people in consultations prior to a design process, or hiring disabled consultants in a design process who can speak from that cross disability perspective and best practices in the sector, to like actually support the initial concept designs, like from concept. We should be building accessibility from the concept of a public space. Disabled people are part of the public. Wheelam says no, it is the paving stone sidewalk on John that is paving stone, and they did some maintenance and left the removed blocks just piled to the side for ages. Oh, so you're talking about like construction waste and how like even when cities do things to address things and it should technically be accessible, then they just forget that people need like access to spaces while they get back there to clean things up. And I think that like that's the challenging part, right? Like they assume that it's a minor inconvenience, right? Like, oh yeah, it's just a little bit unsightly, or it's minorly inconvenient to leave a sidewalk blocked for a period of time, forgetting that like that's someone's like dog walking route, and like that's like the side of the sidewalk that like has less pavement cracking and is more passable and is safer, or is better lit, or is less cross sloped, or is like whatever, right? Like if you pay attention in your neighborhoods and like pay attention to the pathways of people moving, like you'll see that there are subtle factors of like hostile architecture and stuff that force disabled people, like not force disabled people, but like people in general, like if you have a sidewalk that's badly cross-sloped and the other side of the street is relatively flat, everyone will walk on that side of the street. Like, it doesn't matter where it is, and it doesn't matter who they are. Uh, I remember walking around in like Cupertino, California, and like really like out in California, like you'll get streets like that where like one side is like slanted like all the way down to the sidewalk, and the other side just happens to be relatively flat. And you can see, like, based off of the wear patterns in the pavement, that people just self-select for paths of least resistance. And Wheelam adds, like, oh yeah, construction and ramping on and off of the sidewalk is almost always a mess. Yup. Absolutely. We are now at 5 o'clock and have talked not at all about walking holding. I mean, a little bit, tiny bit. It's not all that I want to say. Not all that I want to say at all. But that's okay. We're having a conversation about what it means to be disabled in public space. But I also think that, like, this is like, Wheelam says, oh no, more parts. I mean, I guess, but more things in my life are happening. There's more things that I want to talk about. How many parts can everything be? I mean, the answer is it's complicated, and it takes the time that it takes. But it's okay. What am I going to say? I don't know. I think that in a lot, oh, this is what I was going to say. I was going to say that, like, I think that in a lot of ways, this is, though, what is the background to the process that unfolded with walking holding, right? Like, recognizing what does it mean as a wheelchair user to move in public space. And that's, like, really the first part of it. The first part of the considerations that we have to take into account. The second part of the considerations that we have to take into account is what does it mean to, like, be a wheelchair user in public space, which is what we've talked about from the, like, public side of it. And we've had that conversation on the podcast before. And then the part of it that I really, like, wanted to get into, though, was the, like, devising process itself, and all of the, like, ways that these two factors of environment and public, as well as then structure of a devising process, come together to, like, actually create something that's accessible. So that is where we're going. It's okay that we're just laying some groundwork. I like to get places fast. This is the one thing that, like, I have a human in my life who I deeply adore, who one of the things that they constantly say to me is, you need to, like, slow down and wait for people to, like, catch up to where you're at in the conversation. And so it is okay if we need to sit here for a minute and have conversations about just what was it like even to just move around in this space. Like, it was hard. It was hard. It was beyond my physical capacity. Like, it being beyond my physical capacity was a huge chunk of why I was away for so long. Like, absolutely. The way that I was depleted over going over that space for a couple of weeks in a row at, like, a significant, and, like, some of that's, like, on me. Like, I'm still regaining my capacity back after really being not an active, like, of being too sick to be too sick and too overwhelmed to be an active human for most of the last 3 years. That now that Pushmakers is becoming more active, like, we're slowly getting back into dance, and slowly being back into moving humans. And this is the way that you do it. But, like, yeah, like, for real, the environment played a huge role in not, like, being able to hold space for conversation for such a long time, in a really real way, because we design to what we think is going to work, but not what disabled people, like, actually really need. We're not ever really the central consideration in designing public space, I would say. I wouldn't say that like we're not a consideration. Like absolutely we have building code, people consider it, but like there's a significant difference in like here we talk about like visitability of buildings, like particularly like in residential buildings, and so like we talk a lot about like what can a disabled person visit and how many houses in a neighborhood, or should like the universal standard be that a wheelchair user should be able to visit any structure. And we've agreed that for like commercial residential buildings, they should all have basic visitability, but we have not agreed that like that's true of residential housing. We have not agreed that there should be guidelines for how many, you know, per X number of units of housing built, Y number of houses must be accessible. We don't even have a ratio that's governed in our guidelines in Canada, to the best of my knowledge, as far as it comes to residential housing. And like, and then like we haven't talked about the transportation systems. I'll talk a little bit longer. I will actually share the like getting to and from the Bentway site story. And then because it's the last piece of this that is actually related to like structure, like non-controllable structural elements. So we'll go a little bit long. We'll talk about that. Willem also says you can tell when disabled people are centered in architecture versus when they slapped a ramp slash lift on it and called it good enough. And I would even say that it's not even yet that we're at a place where disabled people are truly centered. I would say that like we're at a place where disabled people are at least often given attention and thought during the process. Like I think about the Pushmakers video, and I think about being in like the Meridian Art Center, and I think about how in that space there's a giant central staircase, and there's some equality in the space. Like I would say that there's some that there's equality in design, in that there is also this really fun massive ramp you can take the elevator up to the second floor and then go down this massive ramp, and like the second floor is like what would be the third or fourth floor in any normal building. And so it's huge high switchback ramps, and you can have so much ramp joy. This is why I'm like, not all ramps need to be hated on. There are some ramps that are a lot of fun, but we're still like the ramp is off to the side and the staircase is in the center. Why can't that beautiful, gorgeous ramp be the design feature that we're highlighting, right? Like, why not? Why not? I also think that like, come on, how is there's something in my head and I'm trying to be like, how do I get it out how I want it to come out? Let me take a sip of tea and try and figure this out. Like what I'm trying to say is that if you look at Kinetic Light's work, they have so much like deep appreciation and so much like deep thought about ramps in their work. Many of their works feature ramps in various forms. Like the ramp is a central figure in One and One Makes Three. The ramp is a central figure. Like this is very much, you can see like Alice Shepherd's like thought progression around ramps and like creative inspiration from ramps. They've produced like a number of progressive and sequential works that revolve around wheelchair experiences of ramps. Willem says decent as well. I think you mean that in regards to the Meridian Art Center ramps being like good ramps. I would say that I wouldn't want to push up them, but they're really fun to go down. They're carpeted, so pushing up them. Oh, Descent. Oh, well, yes, Descent is the show. Yes, as one of the shows, but it's not just Descent, right? Like, they have a vignette. Kinetic Light has a vignette thing. I can't remember what it's called, but with Alice and Laurel, where they have like small little ramps. And there's the work that Alice Shepherd made up in Canada with some Canadian wheelchair dancers that I also can't remember the name of, that was focused on a ramp in I think it's the University of Alberta, somewhere in Alberta. I don't ask me which university or school it was. Um, so yes, I share some of like that infatuation. And even when Alice Shepherd was in Toronto with the Gardiner Museum, that work also was very ramp central, because the Gardiner had all of the Gardiners are pottery museum, and pottery and ceramics museum, and they hosted a public performance of Alice Shepherd's work. It was with Jess Sachs as well. It was Jess Sachs' installation, and Alice was a guest on it. But the museum was under construction at the time, and there were these horrible temporary construction ramps. But of course, Alice, being Alice, was like, let's come outside and play on them. And that was really fun. That was really fun. So, like, really, like, an ongoing central theme to understanding Alice's, like, very particularly Alice's choreographic work that, like, then has Laurel's become a, co-collaborator and conspirator on. All right. So then the last bit that we'll talk about today is the actual getting to the Bentway. Okay. So one of the conversations that like I'm constantly having as a community organizer who deals with disabled people is, what form of transportation is safest for disabled people where you live. um, Everyone has a different preference. Every city, it works differently. Here in Toronto, I do not find our paratransit service a functional service. uh, it's so unwieldy, and it's so oversubscribed that people depend on it to the point of it being not reliable for the purposes of being like an adult who needs to get to certain places at a certain time, and who has more to do in my day than sit around where wheel-trans might decide for themselves that they want to come for me half an hour before I tell them to, or as late as 2 hours after I tell them that I want them. And they make that decision, and you find out like the night before, uh, sometimes the day of, because they can change it on you when it's happening too. So I don't really find that particularly functional as a person who, is employed. Uh, Shocker. So we, and Whelan says, and heaven help you if you're not 10 minutes early, right? Like the number of times that I've encountered frostbite in the winter because I had to sit outside 10 minutes before Wheel-Trans to show up for them to be like an hour and a half late. Like, that is the reason why I have electric heating socks, because I can't be exposed to the cold for that long. So we don't use that because it's not functional, and I shouldn't be at risk for frostbite to get to places in the winter. Like, for real. There's dressing for the weather, and then there's like having to dress for sitting outside for 2 hours in the cold because you're going to a doctor's appointment. Like, come on. Come on. This is, yet another way in which disabled people are not considered human. We don't leave children outside in the cold in this weather. Why should we leave a wheelchair user outside in the cold in this weather? Because we're a publicly funded institution. That's why. Anyway, I have some strong opinions about things. So here, taxis, Ubers are not also a super reliable or functional option. In Toronto, particularly like the area of town where we live, there's like no wheelchair accessible Uber drivers anymore. There was like a golden age where it was great, and I loved it, and it was so useful and so helpful. But like, the other thing that like pisses me off about this whole thing is you have to understand, my wheelchair fits in any car. I can transfer into any vehicle. The reason that I take wheelchair accessible transportation is because the drivers will see your wheelchair and they will refuse to take you in their car. and I'm hard of hearing and I can't call for another car, and the cancellation fees and the amount of time that it takes out of my fucking day to have to go complain to Uber that the fucking driver drove up, saw that I was a wheelchair user, said my car can't do that, and drove away before stopping to listen to me be like, well, actually, it comes apart. We can just put a seatbelt onto it on the seat so that it doesn't go anywhere. And, like, it's going to be okay, buddy. Like, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. So I like legitimately get people to book wheelchair accessible transportation, particularly like when Wheelam and I are going places together, because we have a hard enough time helping them understand that two wheelchair users can fit into a single accessible taxi. It's enough of a fight, even when you book like dedicated accessible transportation. And in this case too, like Wheelam was using their power chair, so like there really was like no other great option. And typically, like, I won't use, like, there is theoretically like accessible public transit routes that could have been okay, but if I'm performing or if I'm working, I don't want to have to like spend the energy on getting somewhere. I would rather just use my energy when I'm there. So all of that to say, we book accessible transportation. It's great. Get it all sorted. They don't call me when they're here. They have the other person's phone number with working ears, and they can text me whatever I need to know if there's any problems. The first week, like, everything was fine. They brought us this like monster van that probably could have fit 5 wheelchairs. And it was a little bit like, okay, we're definitely like the spectacle. This is the group home bus. Okay. But it was fine. It was great. We made it work. The second week, this van shows up, and wheelchair users who have taken para like will know what we're talking about. Like when we talk about the old van shows up that's falling apart, and you're like, oh boy, am I gonna get stuck on this thing? Because we have seen the way that they keep these vehicles operational and on the road. Like, it's awful. So it pulls up, and we're like, okay, it's gonna be one of those rides. Yup. The door on this van was like so horribly fucked up that like after we loaded into the van, it took him a pry bar and a screwdriver and a lot of banging to get the ramp and the door back in place. And the whole trip down, the like the like audible alert signal that something is wrong is going off, like, you know, like the door open chime that cars have, like that's going off like every 5 minutes. And we're just sitting here in this van going like, are we gonna die getting there? Like, right? And like, what is that? What does that do to you to like every time you have to go? Oh, and then the ride back was like even worse because of course with like the weather in spring in Toronto, like it can be anything from like 5 degrees. I mean, we're late enough in the season now where 5 degrees would be really unheard of, but like we were starting in early May, and really cool temperatures in early May aren't unheard of. So like it could be like as cold as like 5 degrees to as warm as like 25 degrees. We had one rehearsal day where we left the house and it was like relatively comfortable. Like it was under like 18, 20 Celsius ish. By the time we were done rehearsal at the end of the day, it had hit like almost 28 degrees. And it was the day that we had the janky van. And like, of course, it doesn't have air conditioning. And of course, we're right in downtown Toronto, close to the stadium and close to the aquarium and all of the like big like downtown waterfront attractions. So, of course, traffic is like stacked to the walls. and we're sitting and stifling in the back of a van where the rear windows don't open, there's no air conditioning, and we're two extremely temperature sensitive disabled people. And like, yeah, we actually had to tell the driver, like, I don't care if it takes us longer to get home or if it takes us out of our way. You have to find a route where traffic is moving so that there can be airflow in this van, or like one and or both of us might end up passing out. And like, it was a truly, truly miserable ride home because of how freaking hot it was. And like, like that's the thing. Like, I don't think that non-disabled people ever think about like that whole holistic like journey from point to point for disabled people, and like what they experience from like the moment that they leave their house to the moment that they get back in their door. And like, even if it's just like if it's a one-way trip, like, never mind if you make any stops or whatever. I'm not saying that people who organize things need to be cognizant of all of the places where their participants might stop, but like being aware of what their participants might encounter on the way to the space or on the way from the space, and be like aware of those realities, and being aware of that, like, yeah, there's a chance that the person who's driving you from place to place may start screaming at you because you didn't understand them, or there's a language barrier, or a cultural difference around what being disabled means that escalates quickly, or like, particularly when it comes to like being helped. Like, sometimes what happens is because these drivers see so many people who need help, they get super aggressive about helping before asking if anybody even does, and before like asking what is needed, or figuring out like if the person knows how to do their own restraints for their chairs, or if they need to be strapped in or unstrapped or what have you, and all of those technical things that come with moving a wheelchair on a moving vehicle. Like, I've had people like buckle me into my seat without even asking me. Like, oh yeah, Wheelam, saying like, and also shocked at you taking apart your chair. Yep. Yeah, like, this is what I'm saying about customer service face. Like, the number of drivers that I have to sit there and like demonstrate that my chair comes apart. Like, I feel like I'm a circus performer sometimes. And in Exhibit A, we have the wheelchair. And now you see the wheels. They come off. Look at that. Voila! The magic. Right? Like, right? And we have to do it personably. And we have to be nice and friendly and smiley and excited to teach them the thing. So that they're not like, why are you telling me? Why are you lecturing me this? What do you think you know better than me? Like, yes, actually, I do, in fact, think that I know better than you because I live it. I know my chair. I know my body. Willem says, like, he really couldn't figure out how both of us would fit. Yeah. Like, they look at you and they're like, how? What? I'm supposed to take both? What? Her? Despite us doing it 11 times before. And, like, despite the fact that, like, I now tell people when they're calling to say it is 2 wheelchair users that can fit in a standard adapted van. One of them will transfer. And like, these are the instructions that they're given. And we still get this. Like, like, we do, you can do everything on your part as a wheelchair user or as a disabled person to make it easy for people to give you what you need, and they still freeze. They still have no idea what to do with it. And like, this is the unpredictable element of what you have to control for when you're trying to put together something in public space. And it's lovely. And like, I don't like, it's wild and it's wonderful. And it just like reflects like in so many ways, like the humanness of living really and truly. And also then trying to create a closed environment out of all of that unpredictable chaos. Like a closed and predictable and replicable environment for a performance. under all of that chaos, and having people who can handle that too, right? Like when I talk about like how does it come that Wheelam was a part of this, and why did it just like automatically be like, well, if I'm doing it then they're doing it, because we had to be able to know that who was going to be a part of it could shake off all of that stuff and still be able to be present in the experience with the audience members, right? Like, and like that was getting through like the first challenge of like making this work, was having this kind of a conversation to really say that like you don't have to be experienced with being on stage, but you do have to have an immense amount of experience and comfort with being in public space as a disabled person to be able to be present with someone else despite all of that other chaos going around, and juggling all of those other pieces in the back of your mind and being able to put that aside to like actually focus on being present in a moment with humans so that you can share that experience together. And then we're going to talk about like how you build the process so that we can share in that experience together next time, because it's taken an hour and a half to just lay some groundwork, because disability is complicated. What can I say? Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody else have any last comments? We're kind of running to almost 5:30 here, so figure I'll vamp for another minute or two to what have you. I don't know. One of the things that I'll talk a little bit about what's coming up if nobody has any like questions or last things that they want to say. So one of the decisions that I've kind of made about moving forward with this is that I'm really liking this idea of like future looking and looking forward and looking backwards at the same time. And I've been thinking about using like the Wednesday night stream to kind of talk about a whole bunch of stuff that's like happened in the past. I want to tell some stories about, I'm not explaining this well. I want to talk a little bit about disability lineages and talking about like being disabled, of a disabled family, in a disabled family that's been disabled for many generations, and having so many different relationships to disability within my own family and what growing up in that kind of an environment was like. I'm thinking a lot about all kinds of stuff. Full Injection says, I just got back, sorry. It's okay. It's okay. It's fine. They'll be an archive. You can watch. It'll be great. Yeah. And so I think that like Wednesday nights we're going to be doing more like stories. So probably on Wednesday we'll talk more about that and talking about like telling y'all a little bit about my family, telling y'all a little bit about the wild and weirdness of growing up with autistic disabled parents as an autistic disabled person, and what that whole situation. Oh, it's great. It's great. We'll have fun. Yeah, so we'll do that on Wednesday, and we'll probably come back to this on Sunday, because I feel like Sundays are a little bit easier for people to come in and out and be a part of the conversation. And this is like the type of conversation that goes better with people, whereas Wednesday nights are harder for people, and storytelling is better. So I think that's how we're going to move forward. That was the last kind of piece that I've been thinking about today. It's nice to see the podcast like kind of taking shape as to what we're doing and how we're doing it and all of those things. So thank you for everyone who's been a part of this experiment as we've like built what we're trying to, what this thing even is. I don't know what this is, but I think it's podcast. And so we're going to go with that, and we'll have fun. I don't know what else to say, but thanks for being here. Thank you for a lovely conversation. Yeah, this is like legitimately, this has been a lovely conversation. And as much as I complain about us getting off track, like it's mostly me trying to do the mental work of bringing us back onto topic and not letting us wander too far. It's not really complaining, it's just the no filter and the narration. So you guys are awesome. I enjoy chatting with you all, and I will see you on Wednesday night. Have a good week until then. We'll talk soon. Bye bye.